Most of the tools out there have thought about a tool that is an extrapolation of the old search ranking methodologies. But the problem with that approach is that it's purely reactive. It's not telling you how to change your world. It's just reporting on what's happened. Google has kind of like created their own knowledge graph. But one of the things that we know is that Wikipedia and Wikidata is a training set for Google's knowledge graph. So the way that we build our knowledge graph is based around open source information from Wikipedia. One important takeaway is that that it's not about whether a human being clicks and comes to your website anymore. So the decision is made before the action, and that has changed. That is not the same as SEO. We know what SEOs do, right? SEOs will see if they see a shiny thing that they can break, they'll break it.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Dixon Jones back on the show. Third time, actually. So Dixon Jones is a pioneering digital marketing expert, currently CEO of InLinks and WaiKay, and former global brand ambassador for Majestic. With over 2 decades in SEO technology, he's recognized for innovation, strategic leadership, and multiple industry awards, including the UK Search Personality of the Year award.
Stephan, it's nice to be back. Thank you very much for the invitation again.
You know, you are one of the very rare people who gets invited back, not just once, but twice. And so, yeah, you're in.
It's a function of our age, Stephan. I've been in the industry for what? We've been 20. Yeah, it's 2025 now. It was 1990 something when we started. So only a few of us still here.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's been 30 years in the SEO industry. So what kind of benefits did you get as Search Personality of the Year?
I think it personally, actually, so I got that fairly early in the awards. Towards the end of my Majestic full-time role, I'm still an ambassador actually a little bit there, but my full-time role, I ended up with a lifetime achievement reward with them, which was nice to have. But I think these things along the way helped me to help us and Majestic to get to Buckingham Palace. So we also, as on the back of that, partly on the back of that, we got the Queen's Award for Enterprise, which meant that I went to Buckingham Palace twice to see the Queen and drink some champagne, which was very nice. Not with just me; there were a bunch of other people, but you know, it was nice enough to have. It was a nice thing to do.
Oh wow! When was that?
That was 7 or 8 years ago, or 7 and 8 years ago. So I did it twice. Yeah,
that's cool. All right. Well, you're quite a special guy. So let's talk about AI, because now you've pivoted yet again. You had a great run at Majestic. Now you're still running InLinks. We did that podcast interview about Entity SEO in 2023, which I think is still relevant. I mean, a lot of the stuff about entities is still valid and valuable, right? It's even more so.
You know what? Funnily enough, I was just pinging Perplexity, because I've got the new Perplexity browser. I've gone to Chrome for this call because I kind of thought, I don't know if Perplexity can do videos and things yet, but I was sitting there looking at a case study we might talk about today, and sitting there, and it was talking about entities a lot, and just asking if there were any notable SEOs that don't think entities are relevant, and Perplexity couldn't come up with any notable entities that disagreed with the idea that an entity approach to SEO was a good approach, or the right approach, that they weren't relevant. There was some stuff as to, you know, how much are they relevant, but very little. So it stood the test of time really well. I think that they you know, InLinks was a move to build an entity-based SEO technology from the ground up, because all of the technologies, the vast majority of the SEO technologies out there, had been born out of, I'm talking about the SEMrushes and the Ahrefs and the Moz to the Moz to that as well. You know, a little Moz a little later, but was this idea that you work out what phrases people are typing into a search engine, track their rankings, and try and get to the top of the rankings. And it was all keyword based, totally about the how many people were typing in best hotels or whatever it may be, and it was entirely based around keyword snippets and stuff. And the whole move towards entities has been fascinating, and I'm really pleased that I did it, because I think that a lot of those tools I'm not going to say they're becoming increasingly irrelevant. They're having to pivot, but they're much bigger, and it's a harder thing to do. Should we put it that way? And the more legacy and more you've put into tracking rankings and volumes on search rankings, the harder it is to then justify that methodology in an LLM world, for example, where people are not going to the website anyway. They're asking the questions and getting the answers in the LLM response. Don't need a click. And it's not about the volume; it's about the decision and the response. So it's a very interesting pivot, and I'm glad we did it on InLinks. And then, but the model that we had at InLinks wouldn't work money wise. If you charge, so we were charging people on InLinks based on the number of pages that you put in the system, and it works really well. So but if you've got a big website, it costs more. If you've got a small website, not so much, or you spend less on it. And it's a great idea, but unfortunately, that pricing model doesn't work in an LLM world, because at the end of the day, when you're tracking LLMs, it's all down to the number of times you call it an LLM, because they charge for every API call. So we decided to go and build a separate product. So same company, it's WaiKay is built by InLinks, is using the same underlying technology of taking content and breaking it into entities, but it's priced differently. We'll find a crossover. We'll find a way for InLinks customers to use WaiKay, in the tool as well. But right now, keeping them separate. People understand WaiKay. Well, they do when they know what it stands for.
Yes, what AI knows about you. Yes.
Yeah, what AI knows about you. So and it's as you say, you pronounce it WaiKay. It's impossible to pronounce. It's impossible to spell, and we don't even have the .com. And I find this quite interesting, really. But
that was a good branding decision there.
It's perfect, actually. It's you know what? It's exactly the same as Rand going and moving from Moz to Spark Toro. He made up a word, and it turns out that making up a word in the LLM world is perfect. In the SEO world, an exact match domain is a great thing to have. Or was a great thing to have.
It still is, I would say. I mean, if you're trying to rank for AI.com is pretty awesome.
Okay, fair enough. However, what's changed in that is that when people ask the kinds of questions they ask in LLMs, then and you want to know, what does LLMs, what does Claude know about AI.com? It's more likely to get it wrong. So if let's take Majestic.com. So Majestic is a word that can mean a lot of things. It can mean Majestic, the search engine. It can mean Majestic, the theaters, Majestic, the wine companies, Majestic as in a majestic day. And as soon as you have generic words in there, an LLM increases its chances of not fully representing your brand. Whereas if you have a word that's completely unique, then every time that word is mentioned, it's in association with your products and offerings that you have. Then what you're trying to do now is make your brand associated with the concepts instead of, and I suppose having an exact match domain does the same thing, but that becomes very exact match, and it becomes very SEO. It doesn't mean that when somebody says, what is the best AI company, or what's the best, mascara company, then that your brand is going to come to the top of the list, because it may well think mascara.com is a place to suggest all the brands of mascara, not a brand that's about mascara, that is the best one for mascara.
Yeah. So why would somebody need WaiKay as a tool and not just use some other tools that they might have for AI-based SEO? And what's the need there?
So the the problem that most of the tools that are out there for LLM tracking, I don't know what phrase you're going to call it. It's going to, we bought AIscanner.net, which is going back to and then we dropped it because it was a exact keyword match. But most of the tools out there have thought about a tool that is an extrapolation of the old, search ranking methodology. So in other words, they're saying they saw search ranking, they saw AI overviews in the results. They said, right, we've got to track this. So they were thinking from sort of an old school mentality, in my opinion. And so they were showing you things like, whether in the AI response your website is linked first, second, or third in the list of citations, or whether there's a click from that AI result, or what kind of volume of people are typing in this kind of query and things. But the problem with that approach is that it's purely reactive. It's not telling you how to change your world. It's just reporting on what's happened, or what the LLM output is. The thing that we did with WaiKay is we did all that because you have to, because the other guys are doing it. But that wasn't where we started our thought process. It wasn't even in the MVP. Our thought process was, let's ask the LLMs, what do you know about, I don't know, choose things here, computers, in the context of hp.com, or, it doesn't have to be a big brand. It could be a very small brand. That's fine. But what do you know about this website, full stop? And then what do you know about the two competitors as well, full stop? Now, what's missing between what you're saying, what the LLMs are saying about you versus what the LLMs are saying about the competitors? Is there things missing in there that are important to your brand that, the LLM should have picked up? Because if they can't get that right, they're not then going to recommend you in the right context, in the right place, which is the end game, right? So then the next step is to say, right, okay, we've got the basics right. The thing is about the basics is that at a brand level, brands try and be different. They're trying to say they're different to the other brands. So, Mercedes is all about, BMW is all about the driver, and Mercedes is all about the passenger, apparently. And when you hear that, you kind of think, that's why there's so many taxis on the road that Mercedes. And okay, and fair enough. All the branding has kind of gone that way. But when it comes to, I want to buy a nice German car, they both want your business, right? So when it comes to the topic of luxury cars, then they want to be there. So the next thing is, what do you know about luxury cars, Claude or Perplexity, in the context of BMW or in the context of Mercedes? Now the topic gaps become really, really important, and the other tools don't do this, So it goes in and sees the topic gaps and says, you know what, Mercedes is talking about the interior leather, or upholstery, or whatever it may be, or so this competitor over here is talking about these things, and the LLM is picking up on these kind of concepts, and you're not. So maybe we can use that to create a topic gap analysis to understand what sorts of things you need to sort of promote more, so that in the end game, when the user or your prospective customer says, I would like a German luxury car, you become one of the list. Obviously, if they don't put Mercedes and BMW in the list, I think that would be an LLM problem. But choosing something with a smaller footprint, and like AI tracking tools or entity SEO tools, what's the best entity SEO tools? I want InLinks at the top in the list, and if I haven't got InLinks in the list, I want to be able to say why, so that I can fix it. And that's what WaiKay is trying to do, that I think the others are not, because they didn't approach the problem from that way, and also they didn't have an entity knowledge graph like we do. So that was helpful.
So for our listener who's not familiar with knowledge graphs, generically speaking, and the Google knowledge graph, how do you kind of boil that down to something that is very practical? And by the way, I just heard recently that Google dropped a huge number of entities from their knowledge graph, like billions or something. So I'm curious to hear more about that.
That's great. So Google don't publish their knowledge graph. However, Okay, going back to the basics, a knowledge graph is a database of topics, for one of a better. And a topic can be an article. It could be a thing. It could be a place. It could be a person. It could be a company. It could be sort of all sorts of bits and pieces. So Google has its own knowledge graph, and there are many other knowledge graphs in the world. You could take any Encyclopedia Britannica in electronic form would be a knowledge graph of concepts, and so Google has kind of like created their own knowledge graph. But one of the things that we know is that Wikipedia and Wikidata is a training set for Google's knowledge graph. So the way that we build our knowledge graph is based around open source information from Wikipedia. So for us, something is not allowed to be in our world, is not allowed to be an entity unless it has a Wikipedia article. Now, that's it's a hard and fast rule. We don't allow me to go in and create an entity in our knowledge graph. Somebody else can, but they're not allowed to be an SEO in the organization because we know what will happen. We know what SEOs do, right? SEOs will see if they see a shiny thing that they can break, they'll break it. And so you need a third party to say what classifies as a thing. Otherwise, you're going to make trainers and training shoes and sneakers three completely separate entities when they're all the same thing. They're absolutely the same thing. So you don't want that overlap. You need something to define what classifies as an entity so that you simplify the world of information. So then if you're reading a web page as a computer, you can read a web page of 1,000 words and tie it down to it's mainly about these 5 things, or these 3 things, or it mentions these 3 and it's about these 2, whatever it may be. So you can tie a web page or anything else really into a bunch of numbers, really, numbers in a graph, in a database, which is the knowledge graph or a knowledge graph. And the great thing about that, when it comes to ideas that are articles in Wikipedia pages or things like that, is that you create a fingerprint and you can compare that to another fingerprint. So there's quite a lot of research out there that uses the king and queen article. So if you've got a king and a queen, it's probably to do with the monarchy. If you've got a king and a castle, it may be to do with chess. Or if you've got a king and a pawn, it's definitely to do with chess. And if you've got a king and a jack, then it's probably to do with cards. So that context becomes really, really helpful when you use algorithms to compare these entities on a page. It really helps a machine to understand what everything's about. And using this approach to build your content or to understand why your competitors are ranking for a particular concept and you're not is really, really useful. And hopefully we've taken that idea. Well, we took it in InLinks and it exploded, and it's great for building content. It's great for automating internal links. So you can basically say, right, this is the page about blue widgets, and everything else that's about widgets and synonyms of that will link to the widget page, and it'll create content schema and about schema and mention schema. But when it comes to WaiKay, what we were able to do is say, you know what? We can also do this algorithm stuff on the output of a LLM response. So when you say, what do you know about StephanSpencer.com, full stop, the LLM is going to come out with a whole load of text, right? Which is going to be very similar to an article on a website. So I can compare that article on that Claude says about StephanSpencer.com with the content that's on your website, and then I can use that to say whether there's errors. So job number 1, is it factually correct? And then you can do that within the context of marketing or in the context of podcasts, etc., and choose these things. And again, you dive in and you start to find gaps in the knowledge graph's understanding, and that's how you can create the topic gap analysis to change the world, to change your world.
So once you have the topic gap analysis, then what, you're writing new articles, or you're changing how you interlink different pages, or both, or what else?
It depends on where you're starting. If we're talking about LLMs specifically, which is the WaiKay product, then yes, it's about what you can change as much as anything. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can start to recommend. We can recommend new content, for example. So we can say, look. So we did a case study on L'Oreal very recently, and we kind of said specifically to mascara with mascara. So and we did it as a sort of an educational kind of piece, really. But we said, right, let's compare mascara in the context of L'Oreal Paris with Fenty and Estee Lauder or something like that, and we kind of worked out that a weather-resistant mascara guide would be a great piece of content for L'Oreal Paris, because the others are gaining traction or getting authority or being better, seen, because they're explaining the issues around humidity, sweat, and other weather conditions. So high priority there. But you can also recommend that they enhance existing content. So, techniques for mascara or whatever. There may be articles there, and we can then say, right, go in and address this because you're missing troubleshooting issues or common application issues and these kind of things. Structural improvements as well. So basically, the ideas are recommendations are different, but they're primarily a couple of content creation ideas, content changing ideas, and stuff, and things that are on your website. We do, however, also pick up where the LLMs have been picking up that information from, because it's not always your website. So you could change your world, or what the LLMs think about your world, not by changing your website, but by changing a third-party website that's referring to you, for example. So I think that's going to be the new link building. So sort of the LLM citation sources is kind of interesting, because if you start picking that up for your competition, then you can go and make some really good business decisions on that. So when we did the one with L'Oreal, for example, Macy's came up as it's basically a product that Estee Lauder are big in Macy's, and the LLM referred to Estee Lauder's supreme extreme lash multiplying volume mascara, which is probably a product, really. So the question arises as to why did they pick up on that one and not L'Oreal Paris's one. So maybe the business decision there is, we need to go and talk to Macy's and change the description of L'Oreal Paris's products within Macy's. I assume that that L'Oreal Paris are in Macy's. If they're not, then they've got a different challenge, and they need to go a salesperson to go and make a deal with Macy's. But there's the interesting insight for me is that it seems that Estee Lauder have got a better product description stream for their third-party sites, which is going out to their third-party people. So then the LLMs can then refer to those. However, the honest and simple thing to do is to change your own content. So changing your own website better represents what you think you should be about. I think in the future, this will get into, reviews and what other people are saying about you and all other bits and pieces. There's other products out there that are talking about sentiment analysis. So are they saying something in a positive light or a negative light? We don't do that. What we're doing is fact checking. So what we're doing is this fact that the LLM, we tie it down to one sentence bullet points that the LLMs are coming out with. We transpose that into one sentences, and then you can easily go down and say, is that factually correct or is that factually incorrect? And that will allow you to go off and fix those issues. You may have to go to a third-party website to fix it. So we had InLinks, we had a problem when we ran this on ourselves. One of the LLMs said that we were a rank checking service. And actually, we don't want to be a rank checking service. We don't think rank checking is a really good thing for SEO, really. So that was a surprise to us. And when we tracked it back through the tool back to the original source, we found that there was a website that had done a review of InLinks, and it would be pretty much a nice review, but it did say that we did rank checking. So we just approached them and said, thank you very much for the review. We didn't even know it was there. Just one little factual error. And they took it off straight away. It was so much easier than going out and asking for a link, asking them to clarify and get the information correct. People don't want incorrect information, or most people don't want incorrect information on their website. So if there's something wrong, then if you can track it back to the source, then you can fix it usually. Well, not usually. I don't know. Time will tell. But I think it's easier to fix than getting a link.
Right. So let's play this out. If you don't have WaiKay or any tool, you're just going to each LLM and you're typing in the query and or the prompt, and you're seeing what the response is from the LLM, and you're looking for using, let's say, a Chrome extension to show the query fan out, so all the queries that happen from the one prompt that you entered in, and you have to go through each of those queries to see what the search results are. And then if one of those leads to that one particular article that you described that mentioned you as a rank tracking tool, then after you've gone through all those explorations of all the query fan outs, then you'd approach that one site and ask them to change the factual error.
Yeah, but I think this is a flawed approach. And I'm going against the SEO industry a little bit here. So, hear me out, if you would. So firstly, if you use a Chrome extension, then you're probably logged into the LLM you're chasing. So now all the information you put in is going to be biased towards your history, potentially. So that's one thing you kind of need to figure out for yourself. This is why all of the tools will say, look, you need something that does API, because you need to take away the personalization, or you at least need to define who the user is that's making that query in the first place somehow in the prompt. But basically, you shouldn't be selling to yourself. You should be selling to your customer. And using your own prompt, your own machine might be a problem. However, the much bigger and more subtle error in this process, in my view, and it's not black and white, is that the query fan out it's real, of course. You ask a question of an LLM, and the LLM immediately asks itself, dozens or hundreds, whatever it may be, of extra questions. Now, the thing about that is that it's falsely creating volume. So it's now now a lot of the AIs are counting all of those things that the machine did as relevant prompts, and they may not be relevant at all. So the very first thing that might happen with I want to buy a house, the very first thing you might say is it a Lego house? I associate Lego with houses a lot, so go and do a query over that. Of course, it's going to come back with not that in the answer, but it's gone off and done it anyway. So why, and then you're trying to count that as a search volume prompt. That's giving a false idea of volume, and it's not even logical, but also most of these avenues, the LLM's going to, discard very, very quickly, because it's made some guesses out there that it thinks it should go and check, and it's just going to abandon. They're semantically way off base of what the actual user wants. More importantly, the LLM will come out with one response. There was one prompt, one response. Okay, if you run it again, it will come out with a different response. But if you try and overanalyze the internal workings of a transformer, you will just get yourself wound up in knots. And it's great for selling, because all of a sudden, something that costs, a few dollars, suddenly you can say, well, I'm going to check millions of these things and charge you, hundreds of dollars. And I think that there's a lack of thought as to what you're trying to achieve. What you're trying to achieve is, I sell mascara. My game plan is when somebody buys, well, say it goes in and investigates mascara in a chat in a GPT, whether to buy it or to research it. Mascara, I sweat a lot because I'm in Brazil. What kind of mascara works? That's a kind of long tail, kind of weird question that people aren't ask, and they're investigating and they want to know the brands that they want to buy. They're not going to get a million answers back. They're going to get an answer back that's saying use L'Oreal for this, use Fenty for this, and use Estee for this, or whatever it may be, and it's going to come back with a bunch of suggestions and ideas. It doesn't matter that it's been to a million different things to get there. What matters is that consistently your brand needs to get in the answer and all the variations of that answer, because the LLM understands your brand as an authority in that topic context. It doesn't require query fan out. It's an interesting thing, query fan out. But for SEOs, that's like saying, you know what, the way I'm going to get to the top of a search engine in old SEO speak is to write 20,000 pages and spam the world. We know that didn't work in the end.
Got it. Okay. So with your tool, well, actually, maybe what we should do is screen share for our viewer who's watching this on YouTube or on my website. Then a listener will have to go check out the video to see this, but we can kind of narrate it through as well. So if we look at a sample report, like for mascara.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do, I won't share the actual product itself. I'll share the report that we did for trying to work out how a company like L'Oreal might. Let's just make sure I get the right screen. Hang on. Might improve their lot, so to speak. Sorry about that. Their lot around the concept of mascara. So what we've in the back end of the tool. This is kind of like the public URL that you can share with a customer or a product.
Yeah, and we'll include this link in the show notes for the episode.
Okay, great. So up and in order to get to this point, you've had to press a few buttons and stuff, and it's a short show, and we don't want to bore everybody too much, but we've already done an analysis of L'Oreal ParisUSA.com, Estee Lauder, and Fenty Beauty, and we've sort of built a knowledge graph of those three, and then we've said, right, okay, now let's investigate the topic of mascara, and let's find out what the LLMs know about these brands in the context of mascara. So that comes out with new knowledge graphs, topic gaps, whatever it may be. And we've used that to generate this report, basically. So it's been through a few processes. Along the way, you might have wanted to go and fact check things and get that sorted out and go and, do other bits and pieces. But now we've got the action report at the end, which is kind of the bit that the other tools, I'm hoping I can stay ahead of them. Let's see. This might end up being like Betamax and VHS. I might have the best tool, but I may not win the war. Anyway, so we've got the AI has now come down with 6 things that are really good about L'Oreal Paris USA. Comprehensive mascara product catalog, diverse formulas, volumizing, etc. Now I'm not a makeup guy, so I have to check this before I give it to a customer. But I did check this one, so got detailed cocktailing layering techniques. I don't know what these are, whereas Estee Lauder have their own strengths, and Fenty Beauty have their own strengths. So start with what's good about the 3 websites, but we can use these 2 secondary websites to find content gaps. What do we need to do differently? So now we've got a bunch of structural gaps that we should change, some thematic gaps that we think we should work on, topics and not only topic gaps, but also ones that we have talked about, but not too much, and also whether they're significant or not. So then we've got these kind of ideas which we can then pull down again into some recommendations. So now you remember those SEO reports that were 100 pages long? We probably all did them, and these SEO audits that you give to a customer, you're proud, you've done weeks of work on it, and it's 100 pages long, and then 6 months later they haven't done any of it because they've just looked at it and put it in a drawer. Um, yeah, it's absolutely overwhelming, and it's just an exercise in the SEO trying to show that they know what they do, really. We've been there, and I was guilty as all. But this is different because it's now pulling out six, just a few recommendations. So literally, this has come out with 6 sentences saying, "Hey, you know what? If you want to become better in the LLMs, better understood by the LLMs, and better represented when people are asking questions around mascara, then these are the things that we think you should do. You should maybe create some educational blog posts around polymorph technology, fiber integrated, waterproofing ingredients in mascara formulations, and easy to understand explanations." That's kind of interesting and not something that's easy to have noticed unless you've done also some analysis, or produce some content around performance in humidity, sweat, and various weather conditions. These are 2 pieces of content that if you create, you're filling a gap. You've got something that you have, or if you haven't got it, you should still talk about it and talk about why you don't have, heat-resistant mascara, if that's a thing. So 2 high priority content ideas, not 2,000, not a list of 100 things. Once you've done those, everything's going to change a little bit, and you've got something else to work on. You could look at it for lipstick instead of mascara, for example. So you've got plenty of things to work on here. You just don't work on everything at the same time. Or you could enhance your existing content. So you've got slightly lower priority on this one, but the techniques, you've already got a guide on mascara guide and application tutorials, but let's have something about application issues, or something in your mascara stuff to do comparison charts within, so don't just have a quiz about your own things, but maybe comparison charts between the different mascara types and things. And then a couple of structural improvements as well. You've got ingredient transparency. Actually, that's probably quite a big thing. For a lot of people, they care about what's in their makeup, and want to know those ingredients. It's not a legal requirement like the food industry, but it doesn't mean to say that that transparency isn't an important thing. So that's been put in there, and then a bunch of claims in the UK. Claims kind of have to get backed up with data and research, or but this is the USA site. So add the duration claims or environmental testing results. And the interesting thing about this is that these recommendations, it may never be humans that go and look at those pages anymore, which is very different to SEO. It may be now that when you put that content up, the LLM now knows the answer to that information, and the LLM can then use that to digest, so that when somebody says, what's the best mascara for humid conditions, it knows to put L'Oreal in the mix, and it knows why to put L'Oreal in the mix. And it hasn't asked the user to go and find this information. It's taken that information and compared it to the other products and things. So then pull that down to, some simple ideas that you can give to VAs or content writers, and off you go. So
that what we're looking at right now is the implementation timeline. So we were looking at recommendations, and before that,
so these recommendations here, 6 ideas it's come down to from these kind of big content gaps and things. But even this can scare somebody who is not built around, data. Whereas, hey, you can put that into an email to somebody, next month, can you do that? Create a weather-resistant mascara performance content, do this in next month, then do that in month 2, and then go and do that. That's your next 3 months work done. And somebody's off and running, and they've got a plan that they understand, and they don't need to have worked out why this information was here. Somebody should obviously check this information is correct. So in the back end of this tool, we actually have a button down here. So it's not in the public URL that the customer sees, but we have a button for the agency down here of assess report. And what the assess report does is it takes the whole report and puts a prompt at the top of it saying, can you mark this score out of 10? This website, this LLM report audit out of 10, and you can go and send it off to ChatGPT or Gemini, and give it a score. So you've got a human, a sanity check. You can just go and have a look and see whether it's correct. You can choose your favorite AI model and see whether it's right, because things do go wrong, and it is worth checking. If you know the website and you know the business, then you will know whether these ideas are good ones. If you don't, then, and you're an agency, you probably should check before sending it off, because it's still a machine. And then the last thing that we got in here is those recommendations to citations. So, here's a bunch of, remember this report was based on comparing L'Oreal with Fenty and Estee Lauder. So now we've found in all the LLM responses, we've stripped out anything that's related to that's on Fenty or Estee Lauder or L'Oreal, because clearly they're controlled by those businesses, and then found ones where we think that any of the brands could get to, certainly a brand that L'Oreal could get to. So, these Macy's ones are interesting. So the fact that there's a Macy's one, Dillard's, Marie Claire, so Estee Lauder are doing a lot of stuff in shop, basically, that ends up in these product websites. But stylecraze.com, best Estee Lauder mascara. Well, then you definitely want a stylecraze.com best L'Oreal mascara, don't you? And so it gives you the new link building, basically, or the new PR, basically. You go on and talk to these people, because these people are cited in the AI responses as authorities, even though the kit.ca may not be, in your mind, a particularly authoritative website. It's being cited by an LLM. So, we need to address that. I think there is a problem in the LLMs generally, that they're not using something like Majestic's flow metrics or PageRank or something to try and work out authority of some of these things. So they're a bit lazy on taking their sources, I think. But still very interesting, because it gives you a strategy for development. And then these scores here are really the underlying accuracy of the domains. So when we asked ChatGPT, what do you know about L'Oréal Paris in the context of mascara, we mapped the knowledge graph of the response from ChatGPT to the knowledge graph of the topics that are mentioned on L'Oréal Paris, and then gave an accuracy score to see whether they were good. So it was pretty good, but not as good as Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder 99. So that's where Estee Lauder are standing out right now, is that the LLMs seem to understand Estee Lauder really, really well, except Claude, who's completely ignored them and doesn't know anything about Estee Lauder. Doesn't even know they do mascara. So, and that's it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, because otherwise it gets boring.
That's really cool. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for making that available for our listener to be able to peruse the report on their own. So
it'll be there until I accidentally delete the project, which I'll try not to do for a few months.
Okay, so which of the LLMs are the hardest to manipulate, for lack of a better word, and which ones are the easiest?
The ones that are hardest are the ones that haven't got RAG. So the easiest way to so RAG is retrieval augmented generative search. So most of the LLMs now will, if they're not sure about the answer, they will do a search lookup, and augment their information on the fly. If they don't, then you can only influence it ultimately by going back to the training data that the LLMs have. So, and that's going to take a lot longer. So you can change your content, but it's going to take a long while for the LLMs to rebuild that training data model. They are doing it. That's why you get iterations of the LLM models, but it's slower. and I think there's it's so they're the hardest ones to manipulate, I would say. The issue, though, is that that's also what you really want to do, because what you really want to do is to be understood by the raw model, not just by the search lookup. The search lookup at the end of it, that's SEO, but it's so that's but the underlying training data, I think, is interesting, because it costs the LLM companies quite a lot of money to include a search lookup in their answer. So I've got a machine behind me that runs a local LLM on my machine. It's all right. It's not the one that we're using on WaiKay. It's fine. We're not. It's a big machine, but it's not that big. But it runs it locally. Now, the great thing about that is I can switch off the internet and I can still use it. I can still use it to ask questions. I can still use it for investigative stuff. I don't need to have the internet, and it's local. That means that I'm not going to risk any privacy issues if I get it to look at my data, for example. So lots of valuable things there, but not so. And it's relatively cheap to run. If it does a query lookup and looks up a search engine, it costs them more. The thing is that we're all using apps, and a lot of us are using free apps. And if you're going to be using a free app, then that cost is a real cost. So to somebody, so they will use the cheapest version of a machine of a lookup that they can. So a lot of people will be using LLMs that choose not to do a retrieval augmented search because of the cost associated in it. Not the cost of one, but the cost of millions of people doing this sort of thing is going to build up. So I think it would be great if you can get recognized in the underlying LLM technology. What is a problem is that I can't sit there and demonstrate I do this, and then the LLM has taken it on board and then moved there, because they're moving quite slowly and the industry is moving quite quickly. So I can only give people a positive approach and know that my thinking is sound, but we've got to rely on the LLMs eventually reading that content and ingesting it and learning from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're running a local LLM. Which one is it that you're running?
I've got a bunch on here. So I use a thing called Docker and N8N, which is n8n.com, which I store locally on my machine, community edition. And on it, I've got hosted, I've got Llama 3.2b, Mistral. I've got a Gemini one, which name I can't, it escapes me right now. DeepSeek's on it as well. The reason I did all this is because when DeepSeek came out, I kind of talked to my business partner and said, I'd like to put DeepSeek on and have a play. And he said, "Don't you put that on a work computer?" And so I had to go and buy a computer specifically for the job, so that I was checking it out. But I'm playing with the different models, and for me, it's a learning exercise. I'm not the developer in the outfit. Fred is the developer in the outfit. I'm the marketing guy. I mean, I'm probably more tech savvy than most marketing guys, but at least in my own field, don't ask me to change an oil filter, but I'm pretty tech savvy on this kind of stuff. So, but I've still got a lot to learn. So yeah, this is my Friday active.
That's cool. And I'm just curious what your take is on all the privacy and security implications of giving all of our data. So I'm asking you now to switch to a user perspective to answer this question, rather than somebody who's trying to market essentially to the LLMs. So there are a lot of privacy and security considerations here, concerns. I'll share in the show notes one particular short video from Meredith Whitaker. She's the president of Signal Messenger. Right, Signal is a really great app for messaging, as far as encryption, as far as respecting your privacy and so forth. And in this clip, she is like on a panel on stage at a conference talking about the implications, in this case specifically about agentic AI, and how giving access to an agent to your data and your apps and letting it drive and have essentially root privileges to your computer is all kinds of wrong. Like it's just a nightmare waiting to happen. Like you should not be doing this. And this is how you, for example, have your AI book tickets for you and pay for them, and you don't have to do the research, and you don't have to do the purchase, and you don't have to tell your friends, the relevant friends, like, "Hey, I got our tickets. We'll see you there." That's like a small payoff for a very, very large potential downside. So I'm curious.
There is, I absolutely can't disagree with that, and that's why I've got this local machine. And I'm trying to work this out because and even when I've got my own local machine, I haven't got it around. I haven't got it to clicking around websites yet. But even though when I've got it, a local version of it working, I can. I still have to be careful how I program it because, of course, if it's reading a web page, then already you're on a third party site. What I would say though is that that risk was already there. If you've got if you are on a tool like Chrome, buying a ticket, let's say buying a plane ticket, and you're doing it on Chrome, every single extension that you've put on the machine is also potentially a spy. The website's got its own cookies, and you've got to, in the UK and Europe, you've got to press this button saying, "Do you accept these cookies?" The cookies you accept are ridiculous, and you can't go and use the thing without it. So of course, and if you haven't clicked it there, you've clicked on another one, so you've kind of already given into this, and so. So you've got the cookies are tracking you, the browser is tracking you, the website itself is tracking you. When you use your credit card, that's tracking you. The payment provider system that you're using is also tracking you. All of those systems can then sell that data on largely. And I think that the privacy problem is, I agree, very, very real, but it should have been dealt with the day that we allow cookies in browsers. And I remember that day. I'm that old. I remember when we were told, oh, no, just putting the text file on your browser isn't a security issue at all. That's fine. It's just to do something. Well, 25 years later, it seems to have been quite an issue along the way. So, yes, they are very real problems. Yes, we do need to be very careful. But at the same time, the benefits that we're getting are also very big. And I as a user, yeah, I'm just as paranoid as we all should be, I think. But as a person that's got to decide which side of the fence I've got to go on, unfortunately, my whole life has been around this search marketing kind of stuff, and it's that or waking up and deciding that I'm going to work in a checkout.
Yeah. There won't be any checkout jobs. It'll just be self checkout.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't. I can't disagree with the lady from Signal. I use.
Yeah. So when are you going to finally hit that allow button and give privileges to ChatGPT to access your credit cards and to?
So okay. So I've already given my local versions of NA10 permission to read and write files, but only within a directory that I'm controlling. So basically, the way I'm approaching it is don't give it root access to the whole system, but do give it access to a documents folder, and then I can decide what folder goes in there. Anyway, I should be able to put sensitive documents in there, knowing that the version of the LLM that's reading it is not ChatGPT in the cloud. It's Llama or whatever on my computer, and that information that computer can't then go and send that information off of my computer.
Are you sure that it can't do that? It, it's connected to the internet, isn't it?
I am pretty much sure through the Docker system, because in order for the LLM learning, so I can just swap out one model for another, and you can put them all in. So it has to be exactly the same format, otherwise it doesn't work in the system. So either they're all doing it, or none of them are doing it. So until they have a cookie equivalent of an LLM, then I think we're okay. But I don't think it's anywhere near reasonable for 99.9% of the population to have to think about that kind of thing. I think that's got to be regulated, and it's got to be enforced somehow.
Yeah, but when is that going to happen, and how?
Oh, only after we've given our souls to the world. But we already did. I mean, if you're carrying a mobile phone, you're already screwed.
So everyone listening, get a burner phone, get off the grid.
Yeah, well, as we've seen, that doesn't always help you, does it?
Get your own garden. Yes, build a bunker.
Yeah. Paranoia is real, but at the same time, you just get on with life.
All right. So, what is a good wisdom nugget to leave our listener or viewer with to maybe take some immediate action, improving their marketing in relation to AI?
I think the one important takeaway is that that it's not about whether a human being clicks and comes to your website anymore. It's about the LLM response is about whether the LLM response has changed that user's opinion of your brand favorably or unfavorably. And the decision is made when they read the response. The decision that they don't click on a website. They don't necessarily. It may not be a buying decision, but it's an opinion forming decision. So the decision is made before the action, and that has changed. That is not the same as SEO. And SEO, when you've got your 10 blue links, the user has not made the decision until they click on a website, and then they'll make the decision from there. But the LLM has saved them a lot of time, because now it doesn't have to click on any of the websites. So we need to recognize that, and we need to not store loads of information around clicks and stuff like that. It's about the
Yeah. The game has changed. So definitely, it requires new technology, new ideas, new strategies and tactics. So. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing some really amazing tech and ideas, insights, etc. If our listener or viewer wants to sign up for WaiKay,
or start at WaiKay.io, WAIKAY, what AI knows about you.io/free. Just go there, and then you can decide. You don't have to get your credit card out or anything.
Awesome. And then to follow you, to learn more from you, where should they go for that?
I go to my LinkedIn. You could go to dixonjones.com, but I'm lazy. So find me on LinkedIn. I communicate a lot on LinkedIn.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dixon. We'll catch you, listener, on the next episode. In the meantime, have a fantastic week. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.